My presentation will be coming up shortly. The first part of it is to proclaim that the industrial economy is not circular, as some people, or like the European Commission or the Chinese government, state that they say that the economy has to be circular, but rather industrial economics is something that's entropic. And what is the meaning of entropy? I'll explain that later. And there's a second part of my title, which says that due to the fact that it is not a circular economy, there are many conflicts with the environment, environmental conflicts. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, people can see the connection of those two parts. The first one is technical, the fact that economics is not circular but entropic, and because of this, the second part, there are many problems with the ecological distribution, and those conflicts, they are not economic in nature, but rather they are environmental, and they're social, and they are many other things. So understanding this can help us find a way in which to make economy less entropic. Early in the morning, I added this slide because we've been following what is happening in Puebla. Several of us are attending the Green Economy Congress in Puebla next week. Sergio Rivera has not appeared yet, either live or that, and there are many Mexican activists who are denouncing how they have been attacked for protecting the environment brutally. So it is impossible for us not to mention this as the core element, something that is not discussed in other places like Europe, but here it's vital. So Sergio Rivera, I will be telling you more about him later. So I've studied ecological economics for many years. I am the second or third generation of economists who have been working with the green economy. Some young people are now getting into the field. That's a fifth generation. But it all started in 1960-something with Kenny Paulding, Georgescu Reagan, Gary Cap, and they also had some other influences. To summarize ecological economics, there are three parts. The first one is that it has to do with the study of social metabolisms, the flows of energy and materials. That is why economy is not circular but entropic. Secondly, it has to do with the valuation, especially the critique of economic valuation of externalities or the environmental damage. This is a type of valuation that is not the only one that exists, but it does exist in the pluralism of valuation. And the third part, which is more related to what I'll explain, is that all of this could lead us to start writing public policies, which I don't recommend, but rather we need to see how the grassroots movements are already taking actions to intervene, not only by offering alternatives, as we saw yesterday, productive social alternatives or reproductive alternatives, but also by demonstrating. And those demonstrations are being triggered by social movements. The international environmental justice movement already exists, and this is what is sowing the seeds of what we want to see: environmental economics and environmental politics as well. Already mentioned this. So this is a statement that I've already explained, so I'm going to skip it. Moving forward. So you won't be able to read everything, but the point is to illustrate that there are studies of ecological economics to show it's not circular. Only 6% of whatever comes into the economy in Mexico, it's around 12 tons per person, more for the rich than for the poor, obviously. 12% of materials, carbon, gas, metals, biomasses, lots of biomasses, woods, and the feed of animals, food for animals, and all of that. The only thing that we recycle is a 6% at the worldwide level. We only recycle 6% of everything that's in the economy because fossil fuel materials cannot be recycled. They are burnt and the energy is lost. Biomass could be recycled further, but unfortunately, as you see here, a part that what goes in goes to the stock. Like, look at this building that is filled with rocks that have been there for many years. And the other thing is that the fossil fuels cycle is very quick, and that is how it is lasts forever. So in this regard, from the energy physical chemical perspective, rather from the chemical perspective, it is transformed into carbon dioxide, which is good for humanity and plants, but in excess it becomes a source of pollution. And that is what causes the greenhouse effect. So don't forget this figure. With this, you can estimate what will be happening in the countries for each type of metabolism and of each nation. Out of all of the things that go inside the industrial economy, only a 6% of all of that input is recycled. We could recycle paper, aluminum, a bit more, but those are details because be them fossil, if more than 50% is fossil fuels, the economy could never be circular, but rather entropic. Entropy is a word from the 19th century that means that energy is dissipated. Energy comes in, but it is lost. It's not that you lose it, but it cannot be reused. That's what it means. Next one, please. So regardless of what politicians say or some economists, but if the Politburo or the Chinese government says it, it sounds impressive, but it's a lie. It is a lie. This used to be the palace of the Inquisition, and this building is evidence of how you can tamper with truth for quite a long time. So, as of the last few years in Ignimberg, Barcelona, many people are working with us around the world. Hopefully we could get more Mexican allies to build this global atlas of environmental injustice, environmental conflict. And today we have 2,550, 90 of which belong from Mexico. Mexico should be much larger. Many people here know about those groups that are ignored. For instance, Victor Toledo, a friend of mine, says he has a list of 500 ecological conflicts. And to me, that sounds quite likely. And conflicts of all sorts, biomass-based, or extraction, transportation, consumption conflicts, pollution that is caused by all of those elements. Oh, this is who I was talking about, Sergio Riveras, for those of you who would like to understand more what's happening and can read in Spanish, you can read in Spanish, but in essence, he is opposing a dam in Sierra Negra, Puebla, where he was kidnapped, an activist of a group that's called MAIZ, the Agrarian Indigenous Zapatist Movement. They have been opposing a dam for 6 years, and this is linked to Outland, the mining company. La REA is the owner. People who are very well known in Mexico, Grupo México, and they are responsible for the pollution in Sonora and the copper extraction they are doing in Peru and others. So this is the heart of a protest of degrowth that is practical in nature. Somebody's there taking actions. The group is saying, we don't want so much hydroelectric power that is destroying our planet to benefit an industry and to make some few profit with no local benefits. So those 2,550 cases that have been collected is just a sample, probably of a 5% at the worldwide level. Like this, there are so many cases, and I would like to emphasize that we need to be practical degrowth, because something has to be done, not only theory. The group in Barcelona has been working on this for many years. These are some of the most recent papers that are connecting this. If we want an economy not to be sustainable or less unsustainable, to be degrowing, the environmental conflicts is something that will help us keep track to the opposite story that what the global economy is sharing. And this chart was done by Richard, and on top you'll see the social metabolic configuration. For instance, there can be an economy like the French one that has lots of nuclear power, or Mexico, where, remember Laguna Verde, there are some nuclear thermal plants. This is a different type of configuration. And so the conflict will respond. It's not that automatical. It depends on the type of government that's in place, the repression, if they'll kill tomorrow or in a month, or the level of awareness of the citizenship. It's not automatic, but there is a connection between the changes of metabolism and environmental conflicts that create networks, as has been said several times here. And for instance, hydroelectric plants in Mexico have given rise to a group of environmentalists that's called MAPDER, Movement Against Dams and to Rescue Rivers, and an ally of Rios Ribos in Colombia, allies of MAP in Brazil. And so whenever they can, for them and get sponsorship, they attend global conferences to defend the rivers of the world. Hydraulical energy is renewable because it depends on the rain and the sun, but if you place too many dams in a river, you destroy the basin of the river. What Eureka said, the fund goods, the richness of the sediments, fishery, those things, they're damaged. So yes, they're renewable because they don't come from fossil sources, but they're also damaged. And people complain. It's not that they are degrowth supporters, but rather because they are being affected in their lifestyle and also in their beliefs. In Honduras, with Berta Cáceres, people believe there, the Lenca population, consider rivers to be sacred, and it is what provides them a living. It is not a matter of money, it's a matter that without water, you don't have water to drink, to water your fields. And this cannot be measured in economic terms. It has to be measured from a cultural perspective. And that is the true wealth. The true wealth, natural wealth, is destroyed to transform it into monetary wealth. And here we're talking about the real wealth, the wealth of nature. Could you go one back? This is a paper that was published a few years ago, but it summarizes what I believe about degrowth. Living well, living good is good. And there are some other ideas that have been around for 2,000 years or more, because some other ideas were not recorded, but they're probably older. We have a philologist who would have to help us understand the history of Quechua. But anyway, the ideas are very ancient and relevant. But they are also relevant as relevant as the books on degrowth. But the most important thing is to see the close relationship between the environmental justice movements, what I'm explaining now, and the idea of degrowth. The small degrowth groups are increasing in numbers, but back then, or right now, we must have like around 2,000 militants. I am one of them. I like it, but the environmental world justice movement that has no central committee, luckily, is much broader. And many of those activists would not call themselves environmentalists. It's similar to feminism. Feminism is more practical. But it's a good thing that people name things. And to have organized movements. What it says here is that Andre Gore and the other degrowth people who use the term, Miguel Valencia, who's not the last one, but he is one of the most recent, Federico de Maria, the most recent, or some of you here, who's 22 years old and who's already a personality and who's been transformed into degrowth. In the history of degrowth, I believe that we must insist on the idea of creating an alliance with environmental justice at the global level. This is the last one because in my last paragraph I wanted to remind you that research has been made about this. There's not only practical experience, but rather there's a group of researchers. Hopefully there were more, but we have the Global Witness Group who has been keeping the tragic accountability, which is not comprehensive, of all of the more fetal lethal victims, like in the case of Sierra Negra, Sergio. And it is like there is a pyramid of fear for every lethal case. How many other people have been injured in the same group? People who have been threatened or scared or affected. There are many women who have died. Berta Cáceres is the only one who's famous, but there are plenty. Of her generation, there are many other women. And we only know about 10 or 15 of the women who have been killed because of their work as ecological activists. And this is something that should be disseminated. And, well, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.